is speaking about the different effects of projects. That you're right. That with Site C, there's a benefit. There's a lot of power that comes out of that. There was a loss of 7,000 hectares of farmland in that same scenario. Right now, we've got a community of Old Fort that's just actually directly in the emergency spill path of the dam there. Would BC Hydro contemplate buying that community out, since they're right in that floodplain, and they're currently isolated and trapped by that avalanche, or by that landslide that's there too?
Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Chair. It's good to see you in the chair. That I certainly consider that circumstance. I think the member raised these issues in question period with my colleague, the Minister of Transportation, a few days ago. I think it was last week. And so I'll certainly be consulting with the Minister of Transportation about his advocacy on these issues, and be happy to meet with him about concerns in Old Fort with respect to BC Hydro. So maybe a good place to start would be for us to sit down and talk about it a bit, and then go from there. I'd be happy to do that.
Member.
Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. My next question, I'll switch over to wind, because you mentioned about how windy it is, and our snowdrifts are just starting to melt now. We do have a lot of wind. We're getting a lot of wind projects. We've got the issue that with the wind projects, some of them are getting older now. As blades age, there is currently no recycling program for the blades. The only solution is to bury them. There are some solutions over in Europe or in the US. But then there's also the issue when it comes to the stage of reclamation and abandonment of the wind projects, especially when they're on private property, and how they can affect private property values on neighboring properties. So my question to the Minister is that what are they doing for the consultation, trying to protect people that are affected in scenarios where wind projects are applied to private property owners? And then will you prioritize trying to have the wind projects on the Crown land, where the ridges are, where it's actually the main source of wind?
Minister.
Well, Honourable Speaker, Honourable Chair, first of all, the member then would be a strong supporter of Bill 14, which has brought wind projects into the BC Energy Regulator and sees life cycle regulations. So wind projects must have a decommissioning and restoration plan approved by the BCR before construction. So we're talking about a life cycle of regulation, which is sometimes on some projects in some industry, especially in this region, in the oil and gas industry in the past, been a problem. So that issue is directly addressed in the way that we regulate projects, and by that kind of life cycle regulation, which ensures that there's a plan for decommissioning. It may be 25 to 35 years later, and it's possible the member will still be a member of the legislature at that time, but he's much younger than I am. So he will follow it through that time, but and it should be said that decommissioning is required when a project is left, isn't working for 24 months, so there's a time limit in that process as well. So on the decommissioning side, that's the regulation the BC Energy Regulator does, and it's not dissimilar to the regulation that's done in the oil and gas sector. With respect to the call for power processes, it should be said that we approved 9 wind energy projects, 1 solar energy projects in the first round. These are because of these are open processes by independent power producers. So it's the responsibility of those power producers to come forward with their projects and for us to regulate and to assess those projects. Another approach that the member might prefer is for BC Hydro to develop them all themselves or something like that, and it's certainly an option, I guess, for BC Hydro to directly build its own wind projects. But the system we have now and the process we have now is an independent power producer process with calls for power that have competitive bidding. It's, if I may dare say, free enterprise. And that will be the same in the next round. So we have proposals that come forward, they get assessed by BC Hydro, electricity purchase agreements get made, and then they go through the permitting and regulation process of the BCER once the EPAs are put in place and approved by the BCUC.
Member.
Sure. So I was bringing up about the reclamation side of it because we're talking about large-scale wind turbines that nobody wants one of these in their backyard. They're giant eyesore, the noise that comes off of them. They scare your animals, especially if they're on farmland. When it comes to impact assessment, that if they are not prioritized to be on Crown land first, and then they come on to private properties, the impact that it has on neighboring properties and on their values, and even when it comes to reclamation, I can tell you right now, I don't care what plans you have in process, when it comes to oil field, I've got an abandoned well on my property right now that I have to deal with. So these happen. If this happens with these windmills, you're talking about a giant concrete pad that it's not easy to rip up. So what are you doing for when it comes to the consultation of for people that have private land?
Minister.
Well, I would disagree with the member. That has been the case in the oil and gas industry. And the result and regulation has made the oil and gas industry better. Equally, we've had in the members' region recently 7 restoration agreements with First Nations in the region. They're going to address fundamental issues around those questions in terms of oil and gas. Equally, in terms of wind equipment and end of life, the bringing of the wind projects under the BC Energy Regulator means, as noted, they must have a restoration and decommissioning plan. The plan describes this decommissioning and site restoration activities, includes the schedule, and explains how all equipment, including turbine blades, will be safely managed, removed, and disposed of. Decommissioning is required when operations end or if a project is inactive for more than 24 months. Responsibility for blade removal, disposal, and site restoration rests with the permit holder. Plans must be reviewed and updated every 5 years over the life of the project. BCER may require financial security to ensure decommissioning and disposal obligations are met. Wind facilities typically operate for 25 to 35 years, after which site must be fully decommissioned and restored. So I agree with him in the past, and this has been particularly true in his region, that there have been issues around the way we've dealt with restoration, such that we've got a lot of restoration work to do, including apparently on his farm, but also work that's being done significantly in partnership with Treaty 8 First Nations and, of course, by the industry itself, and that work should continue, I think, and that's important in oil and gas. We want to, as we're developing this industry, and admittedly, there's some wind farms in the region, but the larger number in terms of megawatts produced in size are the ones that are coming in this call for power. This will be the largest amount. Have to follow all provincial statutes. The permitting process being led by the BC Energy Regulator. The BC Energy Regulator has a center in his region, significant offices in his region. It's our expectation that people will follow the requirements of permitting, which include, of course, the requirements under the law.
Member.
Chair. Thank you very much, Minister. It's something that a lot of people in my region are concerned about. It's not something that's hearsay. Just when it comes to the well that's been abandoned on my property, it is being swapped over with 5 different companies in the time that I've owned my property. This is just something that happens in the region of how they try and get out of the reclamation project. So I'm curious to see if that might be a scenario with this down the road. Hopefully it works out good.